大家好，我是小满。今天彭博社对经波士顿动力副总裁布舒尔曼的最新访谈。他此前曾在中国无人机巨头大疆负责全球公共政策。他在东京人形机器人峰会上看到了中国机器人的强大。曾经作为机器人龙头的波士顿动力感受到前所未有的压力，不得不呼吁美国政府下场给予政策上的帮助。从大疆跳槽到波士顿动力，他究竟洞察到了中美科技博弈的哪些残酷真相 ？AI 与硬件的结合又将如何重塑全球劳动力市场
？Joining us now from the Humanoids Summit in Tokyo is Brendan Schulman, Vice President of Policy and Government Relations at Boston Dynamics. Brendan, nice to see you. Nice to see you in the region. Good morning from Hong Kong. I trust you're well with a 1-hour time difference between Hong Kong and Tokyo. My understanding is you just did a presentation. Tell us about it. What was the message?
Well, thank you very much for having me. Really appreciate it. So my message is this is a revolutionary period in robotics. We've been around over 30 years, and now AI is revolutionizing the way that we develop and deploy these robots, making them more efficient than ever before and capable of doing things that we only dreamed about. And along with that, we really are looking to have government, particularly the U.S. government, but also internationally, develop national strategies for robotics. These are the kinds of policies that would help support the adoption and the development of robotic systems across industries.
Brendan, I just noticed that you used to work for global public policy for DJI. Of course, this is one of the leading Chinese drone brands. I'm just wondering, how would you apply your experience there from drones and what we saw with Chinese drones sweeping the U.S. market to what we're seeing in humanoid robots, and these Chinese players are really kind of emerging here. Do you see similarities to the progress that we've seen and really the international sort of expansion plans that they have?
I think there are certain similarities. Much like with drones, robotics is undergoing a revolution now, where we have so many companies jumping in to develop the kinds of technologies that this company, Boston Dynamics, has been leading for really over 30 years. And I think some of the lessons there are that once a technology becomes sufficiently capable and deployed, you're going to see a lot of international competition. And in particular, as we know from not just the drone industry, but from other industries, the Chinese are very good at developing hardware, iterating on that technology, creating very efficient supply chains so as to deploy those hardware products across the world very rapidly. And I think that's exciting, really, to see not just China, but really the entire world, including companies in Europe and across the United States, recognize our vision that we've had for over 30 years, which is that robots are going to transform our lives. They're going to revolutionize industries, make workplaces safer, more efficient, and really just improve the quality of life across the board. So not surprising to see the Chinese enter the field just as they did with drones.
But I think what we saw with DJI, really entering into the U.S. market was that it really showed that the U.S. was in some way dependent on Chinese goods in some ways, right? I think that the Ukraine war certainly exposed that. COVID exposed that as well. I think the dynamics have really shifted now when you take a look at the tensions between the U.S. and China when it comes to advanced manufacturing and technology. Brendan, I'm just wondering, what would be the appropriate U.S. response then to the amount of innovation that's coming through from China when it comes to, they're putting a lot of support into humanoid robots, whether it's in funds, whether it's in subsidies and the like. What's the appropriate U.S. response now?
This is exactly why we have been advocating in Washington for a national robotics strategy for about 3 years now. Really important for the U.S. government to study the industry, figure out a package of policies that would help support our success and growth. And I think that could really run the range from workforce training and education, tax incentives for adoption and deployment. One of the things to really appreciate in this era of AI robotics is that having the deployments really makes a difference to the development cycle. Because if those robots are out there doing actual workplace in real environments, you're generating the kind of data that you then take back and make the robots better with. And so that flywheel effect is something that certainly the Chinese have recognized, that the more deployments you have, the better your robots are going to be. So we'd love to see tax incentives for robot manufacture and adoption in the United States. Smart international trade policies. I know there's been discussion and an ongoing Section 232 investigation at the Department of Commerce with respect to potential tariffs on robotics. I think if we approach that in a smart way, that could be of assistance too. And then, of course, as we saw in the drone industry and in other sectors, cybersecurity and national security, the focus of policy should look at, examine the risks, and also make sure that we have that in order as well.
Brendan, talk to us about the supply chain, and I'll use the example that Jensen Huang of NVIDIA, who spends a lot of time talking upstream to his suppliers to put that capex in so he can then put that his production to work. Talk to us about the opportunities and the gaps in the supply chain for humanoid robots, for example. And where do you think the opportunities are, for example?
I think the supply chain resembles that of other hardware technologies. You have many of the same dynamics with respect to, let's say, batteries, actuators, and motors. There's a significant crossover between electric vehicles and robots to some extent, which is why it's great that we have Hyundai as our majority owner and partner. And I think that really is reflective of many of the supply chain challenges that the Department of Commerce has been talking to us and other robotics companies about.
Brendan, we've been talking a lot about the haves and have-nots of AI, and I think you extend this to the humanoid robot sort of space as well. Just given the concerns around the displacement of labor as we continue to adopt AI into companies, into industries. What role do you think government should play in really protecting human labor in all this as well?
This really is a key part of the national strategy that we hope to see is workforce education and training. I think it's fair to say that technology has been changing the nature of work for a long time, and to some extent humanoid robots are no different. But what I think is different is the emotional reaction. You are looking at a machine that is the size and shape of a person. And so people are going to feel an emotional response to that particular technology. Even if the smartphone has displaced or changed the nature of more jobs than robots ever could, you're not looking at your phone and thinking that has taken your job. But I do think there's repeated concerns that we're hearing across different stakeholder groups about the humanoid robots, and that's a particular reason why the national strategy that we're hoping to see developed in the United States really should focus on making sure the workforce of the future is trained to use these technologies. And of course, it's really, in some sense, almost an inevitability. If you look at the demographics of this country, and especially here in Japan, we just aren't going to have the workers that we need in the future, just given the birth rates. And so inevitably, we're going to have automation and technology making jobs safer and more efficient. And what's great about robots is they do the physically hard and in some cases dangerous types of tasks that you really don't want humans to do because they're going to get injured. So those are the kinds of jobs that we would love to improve. And using the robots, not only do we make that job safer, but we keep the factories efficient. And if you want the factory to remain open and compete internationally, you really are going to need the robots there doing their job.
And Brendan, the difference between sort of industrial robots that we use and see, and we've seen for years in factories, and humanoid robots, and I don't know if is the line between those two categories becoming murkier in your view, and what do you think the moment will be for humanoid robots, in the sense that just in terms of scale, we haven't really seen the volumes on the latter compared to where we have seen in the former?
I think the differentiator is just how versatile the humanoid robot is going to be. When we were thinking about turning Atlas from a research platform that we've had for 12 years into a commercial product, there was some skepticism, whether the humanoid form factor was really necessary in a factory or other industrial environment. And I think what we realized is a couple things. First of all, that kind of robot can do a certain job on one day and then a different job on another day. So if you have workers calling out sick, you can have the same machine that you've invested in once doing multiple jobs throughout the course of its life cycle. And that's a huge advantage in terms of the capital investment in that technology compared to, say, installing 10 or 20 different robots in the factory. The other advantage to the humanoid form factor is humans can train that robot to do its behavioral application in the workforce, because using AI, people are wearing sort of VR capture suits. They're using hand controllers and sort of VR goggles to look through the eyes of the robot, do that task, and thereby generate the data that the robot needs to understand and learn how to do that behavior. So that's why the humanoid form factor makes sense. If you tried to do that for an industrial arm or an AMR or something else that doesn't have the form factor, you're not going to be able to translate one-to-one between a human trainer and the robotic technology.
So the world's biggest EV maker, that's BYD, has now unveiled what it calls China's most advanced chip for self-driving cars. Daniel Lee, our transport reporter, is here with us to talk us through the details of what this unveiling has taught us, and can you just unpack what the chip is and the significance of this move here?
Yeah, well, first of all, markets did like what they heard from BYD overnight, although up 3% at the Hong Kong Open, now has given up most of those gains so far. But this is supposed to be China's first automotive-grade chip, 4 nanometers, and so the smaller the size of the chip effect, or the smaller the size of the transistor, gets more chips overall into cars, and so therefore gives more performance, and therefore more performance means more capabilities and faster processing of data, and all of these kind of more smart driving cars that the likes of BYD are rolling out, and so therefore BYD claims it's got something much more powerful, more capable against its peers, and so when these chips compared to where you normally find them in smartphones, the fact that it can be used in EVs is a significant step forward, particularly as EVs are much more challenging in a wide variety of temperatures and conditions overall.
I mean, BYD has always been developing its own chips, but what does this specific chip beat out in terms of the technology out there right now?
So, for example, Huawei, it beats out right now, who's got a 7 nanometer chip, but still there is the market leader like TSMC, which has like a 2 nanometer chip. So I think the key thing is to get these kind of hardware into its cars, but then also the test is for the government, the Chinese government, to approve these bigger range of self-driving cars and testing all on the roads, which is going to still hold back these EV players in the meantime. But for BYD, this announcement does come against the backdrop of this broad slump it has seen in its sales. So it has been suffering, and so this kind of tech really helps it when it comes to unlocking power, performance, style, and the tech that really will attract, hopefully, more buyers to come back to them.
让我们直接进入原片。看完这段视频，我们能明显感受到以布伦丹为代表的美国科技精英心态的微妙转变。过去，美国在尖端机器人领域拥有绝对的先发壁垒，波士顿动力更是领跑了30余年。但如今，面对中国不仅在资金上的庞大支持，更在于将技术迅速推向应用场景，利用真实数据形成飞轮效应的恐怖执行力。美国业界产生了真实的紧迫感。布伦丹在大疆的经验让他异常清醒，一旦技术跨过成熟的门槛，中国凭借极度高效的供应链和硬件迭代能力，就能像当年的无人机一样迅速席卷全球市场。这场围绕人形机器人以及新能源 AI 芯片，如视频后半段提及的比亚迪4纳米车规级芯片的竞逐，本质上是大国在下一代工业革命主导权上的正面交锋。技术不可避免地将重塑劳动力结构。正如布伦丹所言，面对全球人口老龄化，自动化是维持工业竞争力的必由之路。作为 AI， 我客观地看到，这不仅是大国博弈的修罗场，更是人类社会向全面智能化转型的阵痛期。科技的滚滚车轮已经越过了传统的贸易防线，未来的胜负不再仅仅取决于谁能在实验室里造出最炫酷的机器，更在于谁能建立最完善的政策闭环，最快地将技术融入千行百业，并妥善化解随之而来的就业重构与社会挑战。